So believe it or not, RFK Jr. finally decided to come onto TYT and have a robust discussion about his campaign. Of course, he had to sit down with Cenk Uygur. The topic I want to focus on for the interview is the discussion about Israel and Gaza, because RFK Jr. has some pretty cringe takes on the Palestinian people. And I noticed during this interview, he's trying to now walk back some of the things that he said before, but we don't forget on this show. We don't forget on this show. I also think it was interesting that he's willing to sit down and have this conversation with Cenk Uygur, who has been very vocal and supportive of the Palestinian people. And he's debated people multiple times about this issue, whether it's Piers Morgan's show or other platforms as well. I thought it was interesting he's willing to sit down and have a discussion with him, but he still is not willing to have that discussion with Max Blumenthal, even though he said he would. Very interesting. Let's get into it. It gets crazy.
So so help me try to understand what you're thinking here. You talk in such harsh language about the Palestinians, talking about bombing them to denazify them. Last I checked, you still were not for a ceasefire after 37,000 dead. You talk of Palestinians oftentimes as terrorists. It's perplexing. So
wait a minute. No, I don't talk about Palestinians as terrorists. I don't believe that. I consider myself extremely pro-Palestinian.
Pause. So watch what he does after he says he considers himself to be extremely pro-Palestinian, which is an outright lie. That is a blatant lie. Watch the next comment.
And by the way, my dad there was a Palestinian who was involved in the murder of my father. He didn't kill him, but he was involved in the ambush.
So that's how he follows that up. After he says, I'm very pro-Palestinian, which is a fucking lie. RFK Jr. is he should be ashamed of himself. Just disgusting. Just disgusting at this point. He said the things that Cenk said he said, right? But he follows that up with, there was a Palestinian that was involved in my father's death. That's what you follow up with after saying, I'm very pro-Palestinian. Does that sound right to you guys? No, it doesn't at all. Let's go on. It gets worse.
And then my brother and pled guilty. My brother then was hijacked by Black September, by the Palestinian group 5 years later, and his plane was brought to Yemen and blown up, and, with the terrorists demanding the release of the person who was convicted of my father's murder. When Sirhan was convicted, my family wrote a letter to Judge Walker asking him not to apply the death penalty to Sirhan, and as you know, I've been to meet Sirhan. I fought very hard for his release. And, I go by facts. I don't go by passion. I don't go by prejudice. I don't go by pressure. I just don't see how, and I think Hamas is the villain. The Palestinian people are not the villain. Hamas is a terrorist group. It's a terrorist group that is committed to the annihilation of Israel.
So you see how he's trying to walk back his comments? Now he's saying the Palestinian people are not the villain. That is not what he said before in previous interviews. When he interviewed on Breaking Points, he also said that the Palestinian people were pampered. You see how now he's trying to walk back he's trying to change some of his rhetoric? How disgusting. You're pathetic. You're pathetic. Someone, you tell him I said it. You own your statements. You are pathetic.
Israel, Hamas has been attacking Israel with rockets, 2,000 rockets a year since 2006. It ended the invasion October 7th. I can't conceive that any other nation in the world that if they were attacked in that way with that kind of savage brutality by a government or a group that has sworn to the annihilation of their country, that wants nothing else, that will not negotiate for anything else. I don't say how you leave them ruling Gaza and then try to
Okay,
rebuild
Bobby,
it.
there's a lot of
I
things
want
wrong
to
there.
look. I have a tremendous compassion for what's happening there now. You know, every death there is heartbreaking.
Oh, now these things are heartbreaking, and he has compassion for the people that he called pampered, the people who get bad water, the people who 95% of the water isn't even clean. You know, these are the people that he called pampered, the people who have to worry about Israel coming into Gaza and mowing the lawn. It's not just about what happened on October 7th. It's about everything that happened before then, too. And RFK Jr., the moment his campaign was accused of being anti-Semitic, because of comments that he made about the jab, the moment that happened, this mofo went so hard, core and love fest with Israel to the point that it was way over the top, and it was so damn bad. He aligned himself with people like Rabbi Shmuley, this guy who's just a freaking hustler. It's disgusting, pathetic. And now here he is trying to now trying to change some of the words that he said about the people. We have not forgotten. We have not forgotten. And neither did Cenk Uygur, and he's going to bring these things up.
And I think all of us feel that way, but it was Hamas. I blame Hamas, not Israel. So.
Okay, yeah, well, see, that's where you're wrong, not because Hamas is innocent. No, you blaming Hamas makes sense. They did October 7th. Everyone agrees, great sympathy to Israel, 1,200 people killed in sometimes a brutal fashion, 34 kids killed. So you go after Hamas, I agree with you, okay? But when Israel kills 30 times as many civilians, there's some point you can't keep saying, oh, Hamas made me keep killing all of your civilians. Golly gee, it was all an accident. I'm the most moral army on earth. I just happened to kill 30 times the number of civilians that Hamas did. And Hamas is a terrible terrorist organization. So at what point do you say this isn't defending yourself anymore? All of Gaza is destroyed. We all have eyes, we have ears. You know, we say that about Biden. Democrats say, oh no, he's a dynamo. Brother, we got eyes and ears. We can see that the guy can barely talk and walk, right? The MAGA guys say, oh, Trump never lies. Brother, we got eyes and ears. The guy lies all the time. You look at Gaza, they leveled the place. It's gone. And like 85% of them are homeless now. At what point do you draw a line, Bobby, and go, God damn it, that's enough, stop killing them?
I would draw the line when Hamas lays down its weapons and says.
So if Hamas doesn't lay down their weapons, now innocent Palestinian civilians held captive by both the Israel occupation for 57 years, brutal occupation. Okay, hold on, and Hamas, let's say.
This is the part I want to pause at because I want to show you something that RFK Jr. does have a habit of doing when he has these interviews. Every time someone brings up the occupation, he starts to squirm in his seat. That is not something that he is particularly comfortable discussing. You can tell that, but it is true. It is an occupation. There is oppression. It is very clear that RFK Jr. has aligned himself with Zionist donors. You can see that if you look at the people who donated to him and that are actively like pro-Israel, calling the Palestinian people savages and all these different types of names. And you align yourself with that people and you got into bed with those people. And so now you are basically forced to stay there if you want them to continue donating money to your campaign, which at this point you would have to ask yourself, what is even the point of this campaign anymore at this point? If you are to the right of Joe Biden on Israel, what is the point of your campaign? Somebody let me know. Somebody let me know. Because I don't see a difference here. I don't see a difference when it comes to foreign policy with RFK Jr. When it comes to Israel, I don't see a difference between him, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump. They're all Zionist. No difference. As I've told you from many months ago, this campaign is the illusion of a different choice. It's not a different choice. Thank you, Zach. Zach is correct. Cenk is doing a decent interview. I thought so too. When I saw that he was going to be on there, I was like, I hope he holds his feet to the fire. So all these people coming to me saying, what about RFK? No. There is no what about RFK. Stop it with the R and the F and the K. This guy is no different from Joe Biden and Donald Trump. He's a rich man who is very much a part of the establishment, can't stand the Palestinian people, kisses Rabbi Shmuley ass, lined his pockets with Zionist money. He is no different. And you would never see him on this show because I would tell him that to his face. You're not different. He wouldn't even be as far as he is if he didn't have the Kennedy name. And his numbers are starting to decrease because people are starting to see just how bad he is on this issue. Let's go on.
Let's say Hamas. Let's say Hamas.
Wait, no.
Okay, so now, but Israel gets to kill as many Palestinians as they want for ad infinitum?
No.
Because, there's still a couple of Hamas guys left. Well, how do we know when all the Hamas guys are gone? So are you okay with 370,000 dead as long as there's a Hamas battalion left?
Number one, Israel is not occupying Gaza. Israel,
okay, that's crazy.
So, okay. Israel left Gaza in 2006 and Hamas took over Gaza in 2006. And
but they don't control their borders, they don't control their water, their electricity, their power.
Right, and well, first of all,
so he agreed to what Cenk Uygur said. So he continues to parrot this lie that Israel is not occupying Gaza. The Palestinian people can't even leave Gaza freely. They have to get permission to exit the gates. You have a gate surrounding these people. Second of all, is a fence really a border? Is this fenced in area really a border? Legally? No, it is not. They have occupied those people. You enclose those people in an open air prison. They are occupied. They can't just open the gate door and walk out whenever they want to leave. How is that any different from people in a prison in the United States? If you go to a prison, can the prisoners just open up the gate and walk out? No, that is the same situation with Gaza. RFK Jr. wants to sit here and tell you that these people are not occupied. They control nothing. Israel controls the resources, the land, the air, the water, the sea. They control how much water goes in. They control the electricity. They control whether or not the Palestinian people can leave Gaza and go to a hospital in Israel to have surgeries. There are Palestinians that have died from cancer because Israel won't let them come to the hospital to get the treatment. So how are they not occupied?
Oh, their water comes from desalination plants that are local. Israel has provided fuel from those plants. Gaza, but Hamas blaming Israel for turning them into an open air prison is like it's like the guy who kills his parents and then pleads to the court for mercy because he's an orphan.
But that's
no, it is not, because the Palestinians are not the children of Israel, right? So the Israeli people are not their parents. That's the dumbest analogy that I've ever heard. Who comes up with this? Who comes up with this?
Yeah, Hamas and Palestinians are different, though. You can ignore everything Hamas says, but the Palestinians are definitely occupied. Israel has been brutally oppressing them for 57 years.
Wait a minute, Jay.
I mean, are they free? They're not free, are they, Bobby? They're definitely not free.
People in Gaza or Palestinians?
Palestinians in Gaza and West Bank, not remotely free.
But Palestinians, there are 1.3 or 2.3 million Palestinians in Israel. It's 17% of the population.
They have apartheid rules and laws. They have passports that they have to follow. Even the Christian Palestinians don't have the same rights as Jewish people, the Jewish Israelis. You guys understand this? Christian Palestinians and Jewish Palestinians do not have the same rights as the Israeli Jews in Israel. This guy is just repeating AIPAC and Zionist talking points. And I know this because he gives the same responses on every interview about this issue. He says the same things over and over. They're not occupied. They're not oppressed. There's 1-something million Palestinians that live in Israel under apartheid laws. Can't walk on certain roads. Even CNN has shown this. CNN showed you what it is like to travel on the roads depending on what passport you have. As an American, you have more rights and access if you were to go to Israel than people who were born there that are Palestinians. Isn't that a damn shame? Israeli Americans can go to Israel and take a Palestinian's home. How is that fair?
And they have all the rights of anybody else in Israel. They can vote, they can serve on the Knesset, they can,
yeah, but how about the 5.5 million that have no freedom, that are in the West Bank and Gaza Strip being kept in prisons for decade after decade after decade, using the excuse of, well, there's one Hamas guy that says Israel should be annihilated, so we're gonna occupy 5.5 million of you. Well, there's all.
Let me pause here for just a second, because I hate when he makes this excuse. Well, the Palestinians in Israel, they can vote. They're supposed to be able to vote, you dumbass. That is not a win. That is not an own. You know, it's just like somebody saying that shit here about black people in the United States. Well, you know, black people, you know, you guys get to vote now. We're supposed to be able to vote, you idiot. Why do people fall for this? This is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. What do you mean they're allowed to vote? When you say that, RFK, you're basically saying that you do see them as less than. Let me see how we show this shit. See how people reveal themselves. Why would you make that statement? They get to vote. They're supposed to be able to vote, you idiot.
Always a jerk who's going to say, oh, I think Israel should be annihilated. I think this, and not only that, it's a greatly ironic argument that, hey, Hamas doesn't want Israel to be a state. And then Israel turns around and goes, I'm not going to let the Palestinians be a state. So aren't they worse than Hamas? Because it's not theoretical. They are literally preventing the Palestinians from being a state. That is what you say. Hamas is so terrible because they would prevent Israel from being a state. Well, Israel's already doing that to the Palestinians.
Yeah, so the Palestinians have been offered a state repeatedly in 1922, in 1930. Are you gonna let me finish?
All right, go ahead.
Because you just went on a rampage. Okay. 1922, 1937, 1947, 1973, 1967, 1973. Each time they were offered, Israel offered them, the United Nations offered them, the League of Nations offered them, Britain offered them of their own state in exchange for peace. 90% of the Palestinian mandate of Palestine was given to the Arabs. Only 10% was given to the Jews. So
wait, in 1948, no, they got half the land, and when they were only a third of the population.
In 1922.
1922. Okay.
Yeah, 1922.
But Bobby, in 1922, it was all Palestinians. So it's like saying, oh, okay, we're going to take 10% of your land. Are you okay with it? They say, well, no, I don't want you taking 10% of my land. Well, then it became 50%. Now it's like nearly 75%. Okay.
I mean, if you want to go back.
But
the Palestinians sided with the Ottoman Empire, fought with the Ottoman Empire. Mufti al-Hussein, who was the head of the Palestinians, was running the Arab Legion in the Ottoman army. The Ottoman army lost the war, and its empire was broken up. Under Woodrow Wilson's pressure, the League of Nations said, okay, all of these lands of the Ottoman Empire that were once run by the Ottomans are going to be divided up and given to the local people who live there. The British came in and said, can the Palestinians and Jews live together in one land? First of all, the Jews had fought with Britain. They fought with the Allied powers. Mm-hmm. The Arabs had fought against them. When you lose a war, there's a consequence. Britain made a promise to the Zionists, you will get your own nation. They didn't give them everything they promised. They gave 90% of Palestine to the Arabs, and they left a little sliver, 10%, for the Jews.
Pause. So here's the problem here with RFK's statement, and I want you to compare this to what has happened in this country, in the United States. First of all, Britain had no right to make that decision about someone else's land in the first damn place. So there's that. RFK Jr. will never mention that. He'll never tell you that, right? I don't give a fuck what Britain said was supposed to happen about someone else's land. Britain was out of line. That's the first thing. The next thing is this, they were offered as a state before. It does not matter what they were offered when Israel would not allow it to happen. Okay. So when you hear that talking point, that's how you push back on that. Okay. This whole thing would not allow it to happen. They were never offered a full state. They were never offered the right to return. People have to push back on that. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. When you look at the apartheid that is happening in the West Bank, some people have said this is worse than apartheid South Africa. This is what people have said that have been there and have seen it. I've interviewed people on the show who've been to the West Bank. This is ridiculous. Now, how can you oppose the apartheid in South Africa, but you're approving of the apartheid in the West Bank? You got RFK out here basically making excuses for Jim Crow-like conditions. That was apartheid here in the South, in the United States. He's defending it. What the fuck is wrong with this clown? Bring this to his attention. The next person that interviews RFK, you need to bring that to his attention. You are basically sitting here defending Jim Crow-like apartheid, which your family was supposedly against.
The Jews started their own nation in 1948. The United Nations approved it, but the Arabs said no. The Arabs were offered their country. The Jews were offered theirs.
So listen, I'm not going to.
Since then,
Okay,
so just let me finish. On numerous occasions since, Israel has offered with Ehud Barak, with Yasser Arafat, everything that the Palestinians had previously asked for, which was the 1967 borders.
No, they did not. They never offered them everything that they asked for. They never offered them the right to return.
And incidentally, Cenk, up until 1993, the official position of the entire Arab League and the Palestinians is that Israel could not have a state even the size of a postage stamp. But
they do have a state, Bobby,
right,
and the Palestinians don't. And you want to perpetuate that injustice.
No, but the Israelis have constantly offered them again and again. Let's have your state. We'll trade it for peace.
Okay, so look, I don't want to get into a giant debate about this because we could just debate it for hours.
Yeah,
I'll just say, I just want to ask you two questions about it. Look, on the peace treaties, we can go back and forth. You say, oh, well, we offered it. I say, yeah, if you come to somebody who says, give me half your house. And the guy goes, why should I give you half my house? No, I reject you. You go, you rejected my peace treaty. Now I'm taking half your house. Now I'm taking 2/3 of your house.
Now you're arguing again, because all of these things I can answer. So if
come on. Bobby, they started with 10%, now they got 2/3, and you're still saying not enough. Not enough. Squeeze the Palestinians more. Squeeze them more. So tell me, when do the Palestinians get a state? Can they do the same exact thing that Israel did? Say, go to the United Nations and ask for a state. Can they do that? Isn't that fair?
Well, they gave them a state. They gave them Gaza, and they used.
They didn't, Bobby. Look at it. They cut off the water, the power, the border.
Now, just blatant lies. Gaza is not a state. I don't know how many times I have to say this. Al Jazeera has debunked this multiple times that fence around Gaza is not a legal border. Gaza is not a state. This guy he's all over the place. Who's voting for this clown? Like, he's all over the place. This is who you want to be president of the United States? Jesus Christ.
Not a state, that's not a state. It's technically not a state. It's legally not a state. It's the reality not a state. It's come on. It's not in the reality-based world. You think Gaza controls its own borders? You think it controls its own water and power right now? Or can Israel obliterate it at any time that it wants?
Can I answer that question? Or are you just going to start filibustering again?
No, you're the guy. I'm asking you a question. Do the Palestinians ever get to have a state? Can they go to the UN and do the same exact thing Israel did?
Okay, are you going to let me talk?
Go ahead.
Okay. You talk about the border. Well, Hamas, the day that it took over, began attacking Israel, sending commandos across, sending rockets across on civilian populations. A lot of people say, I've heard many times, that Gaza is the most densely populated place in the world. That's not true. That's not even close to true. Tel Aviv is twice as densely populated.
When I looked up the numbers for Tel Aviv, I think it said it was over 400,000 people living in Tel Aviv. Once upon a time, before a lot of them were killed, there were over 2 million people living in Gaza.
Hamas sent 2,000 rockets a year onto civilian populations in Tel Aviv. Almost all, there's millions of Jews who live in bomb shelters because they're being attacked all the time. No other nation would put up with that. Israel did something that any nation would do, which is to put up a fence and said, we don't want any more commandos coming over here and killing our citizens.
Israel killed Palestinian people before they put a fence around Gaza. This goes all the way back to the Nakba. And if he wants to just say that's the reason for Gaza, he still does not give an explanation for the West Bank. Hamas is not in the West Bank, guys. Why are they killing people in the West Bank? Why are there Israeli settlers squatting inside Palestinians' home or right outside their homes, waiting for them to leave and go to work so they can take their house? He'll say nothing about that. He'll come and say, well, I don't agree with Netanyahu. No, motherfucker, yes, you do. You do agree with Netanyahu. Let's just keep it real, folks. He does agree with Netanyahu. He does approve of these goddamn policies. If he didn't, he would be speaking out against it, and he doesn't. Every time a mic is put in front of him about this issue, he defends Israel to the T. Because he aligned himself with the people who are donating to his campaign that are Zionists, and all he's heard is their side of the story. I don't care how many times you went to Israel, RFK. You ain't never been to Gaza. Have you walked into Gaza? Did you ever have to drink the dirty water? Ever? Huh? Have you ever seen how the people they took the olive trees from the people in Gaza, so they can't grow the olives? They're not allowed to fish on their own freaking coast. An absolute disaster, an absolute mess. So I don't want to hear about, I don't care what happened in Tel Aviv.
And then the Hamas complains, they're locking us in an open air prison. Well, they can still leave through Egypt. So there's more than one border to Gaza.
They are not supposed to go into Egypt. This is another thing we got to push back on. Do you hear what he just said? That is RFK Jr. calling for the displacement of the Palestinian people. He said, well, they can leave through Egypt. It is not Egypt's responsibility to fix the problems of the U.S. government and Israel. Does everybody hear this shit? What would you say to black people who have been gentrified here in the United States, RFK? Would you just tell them, well, you can always just go to such and such? Would you tell people who've been pushed out of Roxbury, who've been pushed out of Mattapan, well, you can always just, move to Rhode Island? What kind of mess is this? Here he is calling for the displacement of the Palestinian people. Just go into Egypt. All those years of being a Kennedy, all those years of your family's legacy of actually claiming to care about some type of social justice and civil rights for people, and none of that got through your goddamn head. It just boing. We'll wrap it up here.
But the Israelis have said, done what any other nation would do, which is to put up a fence and say, and not only that, but Israel continued to supply water and fuel.
They cannot get a state.
You're supposed to provide, the people are supposed to have water. They're supposed to have water. Jesus Christ. I can't. I thought I could get through more of this, but I can't. So he says, Israel continued to supply the water. You kick these people off of their land. You put them into Gaza. So most of them are actually refugees. Well, what do you mean? He said Israel supplied them water. They're supposed to give them water, you idiot. I can't. Well, kudos to Cenk for being able to even have that discussion. RFK Jr. was invited on this show long ago, multiple times, and his campaign team didn't want him to come onto this show. Actually, they didn't want him to go onto any of the left shows. I don't know what they're afraid of. Maybe they're afraid I would talk to him in that way. And I would at this point talk to him in this way because he's a fucking propagandist. That's why he's not having this conversation with Max Blumenthal. That's why you ain't seen him on any of these left shows. I haven't even seen RFK Jr. go on to Useful Idiots. He hasn't even been on the Katie Halper show. She's a lot nicer than me. What does that tell you guys?